On a quiet autumn evening in a small town in Oregon, Laura Bennett stood by the kitchen window of her cozy suburban home, watching golden leaves fall slowly from the tall maple tree in the yard, and although the house looked warm and peaceful from the outside, inside her heart there was a quiet emptiness that had been growing for years, because after 25 years of marriage, life with her husband Michael Bennett had slowly turned into a routine that felt polite but distant, where conversations were short, laughter was rare, and the warmth that once filled their home had faded into silence. Yet Laura had always been the kind of woman who carried her responsibilities with quiet strength. She raised her son with love, supported her husband's career, and kept the family together without ever asking for much in return. But recently something had begun to feel different, especially after her son Daniel moved back home. Daniel Bennett was 26, tall, thoughtful, and kind. With calm eyes and the gentle confidence of someone who had worked hard to build his future, he had just finished graduate school in Seattle and returned to his hometown to start a new job as a junior architect. And when he first arrived, Laura felt happy in a way she had not felt for years, because the house that had grown quiet suddenly had life again. There was someone to talk to during breakfast, someone who asked about her day, someone who noticed the little details of the home she had cared for all these years, while Michael, busy with his demanding corporate job, often left early and returned late, sometimes barely noticing how the evenings passed. And although he loved his family in his own way, his attention was often somewhere else, buried in meetings, deadlines, and business calls. So slowly, without anyone planning it, Laura and Daniel began spending more time together in simple, harmless ways that felt natural at first, like sharing morning coffee in the kitchen while sunlight filled the room, talking about Daniel's new projects, laughing about small memories from his childhood, and walking through the quiet neighborhood park in the evenings where orange leaves covered the sidewalks like a soft carpet. And during those walks Daniel began to see something he had never noticed clearly before: the quiet loneliness behind his mother's gentle smile, the way she sometimes paused before answering questions as if she had grown used to keeping her feelings to herself. And it surprised him, because growing up he had always believed his parents had the perfect marriage. They rarely argued, the house was always peaceful. But now as an adult he began to understand that silence and peace were not always the same thing. Sometimes silence simply meant people had stopped sharing their hearts. And one evening during dinner this truth became clearer than ever when Michael suddenly received a work call and left the table to answer it outside, leaving Laura and Daniel sitting quietly across from each other, the soft sound of the clock ticking on the wall filling the room. And Daniel looked at his mother and noticed the tired sadness in her eyes, a sadness she tried to hide with a polite smile. And in that moment he felt something shift inside him, not something strange or wrong, but a deep awareness that his mother had spent many years giving everything to the family while quietly forgetting her own happiness. So he gently broke the silence and asked about her day, and Laura seemed surprised by the question, because no one had asked her that in a long time. And as she spoke about small things like her garden, the book she was reading, and the community center where she volunteered sometimes, Daniel listened carefully, not interrupting, not rushing, simply giving her the attention she had been missing for years. And for Laura that simple conversation felt unexpectedly meaningful, because being truly heard can warm a heart that has been quiet for too long. And after that night something subtle began to change in the rhythm of the house. Daniel often stayed in the living room after dinner instead of going straight to his room. Laura sometimes brought tea and sat nearby, and their conversation slowly became deeper. They talked about life, about dreams, about the future Daniel hoped to build. And sometimes Laura shared stories about her younger days, the days before responsibilities filled every corner of her life, when she once believed that love and marriage would always stay bright and exciting. And Daniel listened with genuine interest, realizing for the first time that his mother was not only a parent but also a woman who once had big dreams and passions of her own. And this new understanding created a strong emotional connection between them, one built on kindness, trust, and empathy. Yet neither of them realized how important those moments were becoming, because emotional closeness can grow quietly, like a seed planted in soft soil, unnoticed until it begins to bloom. And on one cool evening as rain tapped gently against the windows in the house felt calm and dim under the soft yellow light of a lamp, Laura and Daniel found themselves sitting together in the living room again while Michael worked late at the office, and they began talking about family memories, laughing about the time Daniel tried to build a treehouse when he was 10 and accidentally broke the ladder. And for a moment the room filled with the warm laughter Laura had missed for years. But when the laughter faded, a thoughtful silence followed. And Daniel looked at his mother with new awareness, noticing the strength in her quiet personality, the patience in her voice, the kindness she had shown him his entire life, and Laura noticed the same maturity in Daniel, realizing he was no longer the little boy she once helped with homework but a grown man with a thoughtful heart and steady presence. And although nothing unusual happened that evening, both of them felt that something inside the family dynamic had gently shifted, something emotional and delicate that neither could yet name. And later that night, as Laura turned off the lights downstairs and paused by the kitchen window once again, she watched the rain falling softly under the streetlight and felt a strange mix of comfort and confusion in her heart, because for the first time in many years she felt truly seen and understood. Yet she also sensed that the closeness growing between her and Daniel might eventually bring questions that no family ever expects to face. While upstairs, Daniel lay awake in his room staring at the ceiling, thinking about the quiet sadness he had noticed in his mother's eyes and wondering why it had taken him so long to see it. And although his feelings were still simple care and deep respect, somewhere deep inside his thoughts a new awareness had begun to form. The awareness that emotional boundaries in families can sometimes become fragile when loneliness and kindness meet at the same moment, and neither of them knew it yet. But that quiet autumn season was only the beginning of a story that would soon test the strength of their hearts and the meaning of loyalty inside their family. Winter arrived quietly in the small Oregon town, covering streets, rooftops, and trees with soft white snow, and inside the Bennett house life moved forward in a calm routine. Yet the emotional atmosphere between Laura and her son Daniel had begun to change in ways that neither of them expected. Daniel settled into his new job at a local architecture firm where his creative ideas quickly impressed his team, while Laura continued caring for the home and spending time in her small backyard garden even in the cold months. But the evenings slowly became the most meaningful part of their days because Michael's demanding work schedule often kept him away until late at night, leaving the house peaceful and quiet. And during those evenings, Laura and Daniel naturally found themselves talking more often in the living room or kitchen, sharing tea, simple meals, and long conversations that felt easy and comforting. And what started as normal family moments slowly turned into something deeper emotionally because Daniel began to notice details about his mother that he had never fully understood before: the way she spoke gently even when she felt sad, the patience she showed in every small task, the thoughtful advice she offered when he talked about work challenges. And these qualities made him admire her not only as a parent but as a person who had lived a life full of quiet strength, while Laura also began to see Daniel in a new light, realizing that the boy she once helped with school projects had grown into a thoughtful and caring man who respected her opinions and listened carefully to everything she said, something she had not experienced in a long time, especially as her conversations with Michael had slowly become shorter over the years. So the emotional comfort she felt during those talks with Daniel became something she looked forward to each day, even though she could not clearly explain why. One evening, as snow fell gently outside and the streets looked silent under the glow of streetlights, Daniel returned home from work and found Laura sitting at the kitchen table reading a book with a cup of warm tea beside her, the soft yellow light making the room feel calm and welcoming. And when she looked up and smiled, Daniel felt the simple warmth of being home. So he sat down across from her and began telling stories about his first big design project at the firm, explaining how he wanted the building to feel modern but also comfortable for the community. And Laura listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions that made Daniel realize how much he valued her perspective. And after he finished speaking, she shared a story from her younger days when she once dreamed of studying art and design herself before choosing a different path after marriage. And Daniel was surprised because he had never heard that before, which made him understand that his mother had once carried many dreams she never talked about, dreams that slowly disappeared as she focused on raising a family and supporting her husband's career. And as their conversation continued, the hours passed quickly, the quiet house allowing their voices to echo softly through the warm kitchen, until suddenly the power went out because of the strong winter storm moving through the town, leaving the house dark except for the faint light of snow outside reflecting through the windows. And Laura calmly brought a few candles from the drawer and placed them around the living room, creating a soft golden glow that made the room feel peaceful and almost timeless. And wrapped in warm blankets, they sat on the couch listening to the wind outside, talking about life in a way they never had before. Laura spoke about how marriage changes over time and how sometimes people slowly grow distant without meaning to, not because they stop caring but because responsibilities and routine quietly replace the effort that once kept love alive. And Daniel listened seriously, realizing she was sharing something deeply personal. and after a long pause he gently said that she deserved to feel appreciated and understood, because she had given so much of her life to the family. And hearing those words made Laura feel an unexpected emotion rise in her heart, because it had been many years since someone had expressed that kind of appreciation for her sacrifices, and for a brief moment they looked at each other across the candlelight in silence, a quiet emotional connection passing between them that felt both comforting and confusing at the same time. So Laura quickly looked away and continued talking about ordinary things, trying to return the moment to normal, while Daniel also sensed that something delicate had just happened and chose not to mention it. And when the electricity finally returned, the bright lights seemed to break the quiet spell that had filled the room, bringing them both back to reality. Yet the memory of that moment remained in their thoughts long after the evening ended. Over the following weeks, both Laura and Daniel tried to focus on their daily routines. Daniel worked longer hours at the office while Laura became more active in community events and reading groups. But no matter how busy their schedules became, they still found time for small conversations in the evenings, and those conversations continued to reveal how deeply they understood each other's thoughts, something that felt rare and meaningful in a world where people often rush through life without truly listening. Yet beneath that comfort, both of them began to feel a quiet tension growing inside their hearts, because they realized that their emotional connection was becoming stronger than what most people expect between a parent and an adult child. And even though nothing inappropriate had happened and their intentions remained respectful, the awareness itself made them more careful, more thoughtful about how much time they spent together and how personal their conversations became, while Michael remained mostly unaware of the emotional shift happening inside his home, because his work responsibilities continued to demand long hours and frequent business trips. And although he trusted his family completely, his absence created a space where loneliness and kindness had quietly brought two people closer than they expected. And one afternoon, as Daniel prepared to leave for work, Laura stopped him near the front door and simply said thank you for always being there to talk with her. And Daniel smiled warmly and told her that family should always support each other. But as he walked down the driveway toward his car, he felt a strange unease in his chest, because deep down he knew that emotions, even the most innocent ones, can become complicated when people who care about each other deeply also share loneliness and understanding at the same time. While Laura stood in the doorway watching him leave and wondered if the comfort she had found in his presence was helping her heart heal from years of quiet distance, or slowly guiding them toward a boundary that families are never meant to cross. And neither of them knew yet that the coming months would force them to face those feelings honestly and decide what truly mattered most in their lives. By early spring, the Bennett home carried the freshness of blooming flowers and warmer sunlight, but the emotional closeness between Laura and Daniel had grown into a quiet tension that neither fully understood. As Daniel continued his work at the architecture firm, taking on bigger responsibilities and enjoying the challenge of contributing to projects that shaped the town, while Laura filled her days with gardening, book clubs, and small community activities, yet the evenings remained the most significant part of their lives, because Michael's demanding career kept him away long hours, leaving the house calm and open for conversations that felt easy and comforting. And during those evenings, Laura and Daniel found themselves naturally spending time together again, sometimes sitting by the fireplace, sometimes walking through the neighborhood park, speaking about memories, life, and dreams they had never shared before. And in those moments, they both discovered feelings they had not expected, a deep emotional bond built on understanding, admiration, and care, yet one that came with an unspoken danger, because the closeness felt personal in a way that made both of them pause, realizing that their hearts were quietly shifting, though neither wanted to admit it aloud. And Laura, reflecting on her marriage, realized how distant she and Michael had grown over the years, not due to fights or anger, but a slow disappearance of warmth and connection, replaced by routine, work, and silent evenings where conversation rarely ventured beyond small talk. And that awareness made her cherish the conversations she now had with Daniel even more, because they reminded her of the attention, understanding, and kindness she had been missing, while Daniel, noticing his mother's quiet longing and gentle patience, felt both admiration and a complicated emotional pull that he struggled to define, understanding that the affection he felt was natural for a parent, but the depth of their connection was beginning to blur lines he knew should exist. Yet neither of them acted on those feelings, instead choosing moments of shared comfort, laughter, and genuine care that strengthened their bond without crossing boundaries. And one afternoon, as Laura planted new flowers in the backyard while Daniel helped dig small holes, sunlight warming the garden and The air filled with birdsong, they shared stories of past dreams and future hopes, with Laura speaking softly about choices she had made, sacrifices for family, and moments she sometimes regretted, while Daniel listened closely, realizing the courage it took for her to admit such thoughts and how much resilience she carried silently. And as they paused to admire the freshly planted flowers, the conversation turned to the nature of love and relationships, with Laura admitting that loneliness can creep quietly into a life and Daniel acknowledging that emotional closeness can sometimes feel confusing, and in that shared understanding they both recognized the fragile boundary that existed between them, the love of a family and the pull of deep, unspoken emotions, and that recognition created a solemn awareness that they needed to protect their family above all, while still honoring the genuine care they felt for each other. And later that evening, Laura spoke honestly with Michael, telling him that she had been feeling distant and lonely in ways she had not expressed before, explaining that she wanted to reconnect with him and revive the warmth they once shared, and Michael, hearing her vulnerability for the first time in years, listened attentively, realizing how much he had let work and routine overshadow their relationship, and their conversation, though emotional, was respectful and filled with the intention to rebuild, opening the door for a marriage that could heal. While Daniel watched from a distance, feeling relief that boundaries had been respected and pride that his mother and father were working to strengthen their connection, yet he also understood the lesson life had quietly taught him, that emotional closeness can be powerful and healing, but it can also be dangerous if not tempered with respect, and that love within a family is not just about affection, but about understanding limits and making choices that protect everyone involved. And as the days passed, the Bennett family slowly began to adjust to this new balance, with Daniel focusing on his career and personal growth, Laura spending time nurturing both her garden and her marriage, and Michael making conscious efforts to show care and attention. And although the memory of the quiet moments between mother and son lingered in their minds, it no longer carried the weight of temptation or confusion, instead serving as a gentle reminder that honest communication, respect for boundaries, and deliberate choices are what sustain relationships through challenges. And by the time spring gave way to early summer, the Bennett household had entered a season of cautious stability, a home where emotional awareness had brought both clarity and growth, a family learning to navigate the complexities of love, connection, and loyalty. And though the path had been delicate and the emotions intense, they all understood that protecting the bonds that held them together required patience, honesty, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths while nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. Summer arrived in the small Oregon town with long, warm evenings and golden sunlight spilling across the Bennett home, and while everything looked peaceful on the outside, inside the family life had quietly transformed over the past months. Laura and Michael had begun rebuilding their marriage with small but meaningful gestures, taking walks together in the neighborhood, sharing meals without distractions, laughing again, and rediscovering conversations that had been lost to years of routine and distance, while Daniel, having witnessed the changes between his parents, understood the importance of boundaries and the strength that honesty could bring to relationships. And even though the emotional closeness he had shared with his mother in the winter months had been intense, it no longer carried the tension it once did, because all three of them had learned valuable lessons about love, care, and respect within a family. And Laura often reflected on that difficult period, realizing that the moments she had shared with Daniel had acted as a mirror, showing her the depth of her own loneliness and the importance of expressing her feelings openly to Michael instead of letting them remain buried in silence. And Daniel also carried lessons of his own, understanding that emotional connections can be powerful but must always be guided by responsibility, respect, and awareness of the impact on others. And as the days grew longer, the Bennett family began to settle into a new rhythm. One filled with honesty, effort, and deliberate attention to one another, Michael making conscious efforts to spend quality time with Laura, appreciating her thoughts and listening to her stories, and Laura reciprocating with warmth and openness, both realizing that a relationship requires active participation rather than passive presence. While Daniel prepared for a new career opportunity in another city, knowing that leaving the home he had grown up in was necessary for his personal growth, and that his experiences at home had given him valuable insight into handling complicated emotions with care. And in the evenings, the three of them often sat on the back porch together watching the sun set over the quiet town, talking about life, hopes, and dreams. And Michael spoke gently about the challenges of marriage and the importance of understanding, honesty, and patience, while Laura shared reflections about the past and the lessons she had learned about valuing herself and her emotional needs, and Daniel listened, feeling gratitude for the family that had grown stronger through both difficulty and introspection, and in those moments, they all recognized that the Bennett family had faced an emotional test unlike any other, yet instead of letting it break them apart, they had chosen communication, respect, and love, turning potential heartbreak into growth. And though the memory of the winter when closeness had almost crossed into dangerous territory lingered, it no longer carried shame or fear, but became a reminder of the importance of boundaries, emotional awareness, and the strength that comes from making conscious choices to protect the family bond. And as Laura and Michael continued rebuilding their marriage, they discovered joy in small, everyday moments, like shared laughter over morning coffee, quiet evenings reading together, or gentle conversations while gardening. And Daniel, on the verge of leaving for a new chapter in his life, felt pride and hope, knowing that he had contributed in his own way to the family's healing, while also understanding that love is not just about emotion but about actions, decisions, and protecting the trust that keeps a family united. And finally, as summer days unfolded with warmth and light, the Bennett family understood that life is fragile, hearts are delicate, and relationships require constant care. And though they had faced confusion, loneliness, and emotional intensity, they emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of themselves, each other, and the boundaries that make love safe and lasting. And as Daniel packed his things to leave for the new city, he shared a quiet moment with Laura and Michael on the porch, watching the sky turn orange and gold, feeling both the weight of leaving home and the confidence that his family was now prepared to face life with honesty, respect, and love. And in that shared silence, each of them knew that while the past had tested them, the future held the promise of growth, connection, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be a family that truly cares for one another. And though life would continue to bring challenges, they now had the tools, awareness, and courage to protect their bond, honor their feelings, and choose actions that strengthened, rather than threatened, the love that held them together, leaving them with a quiet peace and hope that no matter what came next, the Bennett family had changed forever, not in ways that hurt, but in ways that made them stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before.